Hello, BookTube. I have a tag here for you today. This is the Murder on the Orient Express book tag. It was created by the Hungry Bookworm, and I'll leave a link to her original video in the description down below. And I was tagged by Dane over at Dane Reads, and I'll leave a link to his video, the one where he tagged me, in the description down below. So the premise behind this tag is, I guess the Hungry Bookworm was reading through Murder on the Orient Express at the time, and made a list of prompts related either to characters in that novel or to plot elements in that novel, the setting, the conditions. And then each prompt, of course, you have to find a book that matches that prompt. I'm going to make a brief confession at the beginning of this. I actually haven't read Murder on the Orient Express. I know it's a classic. I should read it. I did see the 1974 movie. 1974, right? So I am aware of the twist ending at the end. But I haven't read the book, and I haven't seen the movie. I saw the movie like 20 years ago or something like that. So I mention that because I may mispronounce some of the character names here. But yeah, let's just jump into it and see how I do. First one is Mrs. Hubbard, the character from the book. And the prompt is you have to think of a multi-dimensional book. Now, Hungry Bookworm, in her original video, said that you can interpret multi-dimensional in a range of ways. You can think of it as a book that has many different aspects to it, or a character in a book that has many different aspects to it. Or you can think of multi-dimensional in like the science fiction type way, where, there are different dimensions or different universes that characters can travel through. Dane Reads, in the video in which he tagged me in, went with The Subtle Knife by Philip Pullman as a book in which they were traveling to different universes, different parallel universes. And I've also read that book, and I agree with Dane. That's a perfect book to do with this prompt. So I'm going to piggyback off of his response. If you want a good book about jumping between different parallel universes, you can't do better than that. That was a really good book on that concept. Okay, next one is Colonel ARTHBUTNOT, or something like that, which is a book with a love affair or mistress. So I'm going to go with Lady Chatterley's Lover here, which I read. When did I read that? It was about 3 or 4 years ago now, and reviewed on this channel. Next one is Mr. Ratchet, A Book You Love to Hate. So I'm going to go with A Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. So Lee Strobel is a Christian apologist who wrote a book called The Case for Christ, in which he argued that if you examine the historical data, there's a 100% chance that the Gospels are completely factually accurate. I'm a skeptic, so I was already a hostile reader going into it, and I found it riddled with obvious errors. And skeptics love this book. If you Google reviews of Case for Christ, atheists just love this book because there is so much low-hanging fruit to just dismember. If you'll let me mix my metaphors, I guess. There's just so many low-hanging, either factual inaccuracies or logical fallacies, or just inconsistencies, where he's arguing one thing on one page and then he switches his argument on the other page. And I fell into that trap. I wrote a multi-part review on my blog, which I'll link to down below, in which I made way too much of a meal out of this book. I look back on that review and I think, what was I thinking? Why did I take the bait? But I took it. And I I went all in and wrote this huge review trying to nitpick everything he gets wrong. And so yeah, that would be me. That's a book I had a lot of fun hating on. All right, next, Princess Dragamiroff, a book that has been mouldering on your shelves for a while. So actually, this year, 2021, has been a very good year for me in terms of knocking off these books that have just been lingering on my shelf for a long time. I've knocked off a number of them this year. Don Quixote, which I had been halfway through for like 3 years and finally knocked it off this year. The Brothers Grimm, which again had been sitting on my shelves for a long time, but I finally read all the way through it. The Moral Animal, which I can't show you because it's actually part of the stack of books holding up this camera at the moment, but knocked that one off. That another book I started like 3 or 4 years ago and just got stalled out on. This one that I'm currently reading with Dane, The Complete Stories of Oz, which I've had for 5 years, but have got stalled on, and it's just been sitting on my shelf. But now Dane and I are working through this series again, so hopefully I'll have this finished off within this coming year. But the one actually that has been moldering on my shelves the longest, which I did finally finish this year, is Chomsky's Universal Grammar by Vivian Cook and Mark Newsom. This book I got back in 2009, I think. So this has been on my shelf since 2009. I've always been intimidated by it, started and stopped it a few times, but finally finished it this year. And actually, I was on Twitter yesterday, and one of the authors of this book, Vivian Cook, just passed away last night, apparently. So I'm not sure if it's in bad form to mention that in passing, because it's quite tragic that he died. I had been following him on Twitter while I was reading this book, and he didn't tweet a lot, but he seemed like a nice guy, from what I could make out of it. So it's a shame that he passed away, but yeah, I finally this year finished off this book. All right, next is BEDDOES, a book with a main character in service. So Dane did Jeeves for this one, and he was talking about the first Jeeves book, which I forget which book he says. Was it Jeeves to the Rescue or something like that? I'm going to piggyback off of Dane's answer, because when I think of a book about a character who's in service or a character who's a servant, yeah, those Jeeves books pop right to mind, huh? Now, the one I read, actually, and I did this with my book club about 3 years ago now, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now, was called Thank You, Jeeves, which is not the first Jeeves book, but it's the first Jeeves novel, because the previous books before that had been short story collections. So this is the first book that's a complete novel. So my book club chose to do that one. But I do have it in mind, actually, to try and go back and maybe read the complete Jeeves series one of these days. I did really enjoy Thank You, Jeeves. I found the humor quite good. Okay, the next one, The Train Itself. Another book that features this train being the Oriental Express. So I've got a perfect one for this. Flashman and the Tiger by George MacDonald Fraser. So the Flashman series, if you're familiar with it, is historical fiction mixed with comedy, based upon the character of Flashman. In each book, he finds himself in a different historical situation. Flashman and the Tiger is actually 3 stories collected in one book, but one of those stories is about the beginning of the Orient Express, like the very first voyage. Do you say voyage with trains? The very first run that train did. So the inaugural voyage. What do you say with trains? Do trains go on voyages? Anyways, the beginning of the Orient Express is forms the background to one of the plots in Flashman and the Tiger. Okay, next one, Snowstorm, a book that features a snowstorm or characters stuck in a weather condition. So I went to my blog to look at all the books I've read and reviewed over the past 15 years, and couldn't find anything good for this, or at least didn't make the connection. And I've got a feeling that there's something there. I know I've read books about snowstorms, or books where a snowstorm will feature in at least part of the book. And this is going to be one of those things where I kick myself 2 days later when it finally clicks. But at the moment, I can't think of anything. The only things I've got at the moment, actually, is Frozen Heart of Dread, which features snowy conditions. To the best of my memory, well, I think there is like some snowstorms, but the characters don't actually get stuck in it. It's just like it's snowing heavily. And then one I'm actually almost finished with, but not quite finished, is the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Rings, that they get caught in a snowstorm up in the mountains briefly for like one chapter. So that's all I've got for that one. Next one is Yugoslavia, a non-fiction book about Yugoslavia, or a novel set in a Slavic country. So yeah, for this one actually, so I've not read any books I can't think of, either fiction or non-fiction, dealing about Yugoslavia during the years that it was Yugoslavia. I have read a book, The Revolutions of 1848, which featured that region. The Croats and the Serbs when they were part of the Hungarian Empire. And it wasn't the whole book. It was a section of the book. But it did talk about the ethnic tensions there that would later explode into World War I, and then all that chaos in the 1990s that some of us may remember. So Revolutions of 1848 may be talking about that region. The other alternative to this prompt, this is a little bit strange maybe. The text says a novel set in a Slavic country. So I Googled Slavic countries, and Russia is a Slavic country, right? I mean, not only Slavic, it's multi-ethnic, but it, among other things, it's got a very high Slavic population, right? So I think I can use Russia for this prompt, which would be War and Peace, which I read. When did I read War and Peace? 2009, I think I read it. Probably getting due for a reread one of these days, but really enjoyed it when I did read it, and it is like the perfect book about Russia. I mean, it's a book that really, you get to experience all these different facets of what life was like in Russia at that time through the book. So it's like the perfect Russian book. There is something though, I was watching Hungry Bookworm's original video, and I think what she says in the video doesn't actually match the written prompt. I think in the video she says maybe a travelogue about a Slavic country, but in the written prompt it says a novel set in a Slavic country. Apologies if I've got that confused. Maybe I should go and rewatch the video. But if it's a travel book set in a Slavic country, I don't know. But if it's a novel set in a Slavic country, I'm doing War and Peace. Or as a nonfiction, possibly the revolutions of 1848, although that was the region of Yugoslavia before it was Yugoslavia. Okay, sorry for rambling. Last, tag some people. So I'm going to tag Sean Holt, P. English Literature, Books of Blood, Mindy's Book Journey, Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading, Jim at Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff, and then Kelsey Bain. Kelsey, I'm not sure if you consider your channel active or not these days, but if you're looking for an excuse to get back into that channel, you can consider this prompt as your excuse. All right, I'll see you on the next one.